The anchorage remembered debt. Commander Eva Rostova felt the hum in her bones, a vibration that defied the ship's inertial dampeners. It was a phantom signal, a ghost in the machine that whispered from the Tartarus maw. Her vessel, the Coalition patrol cutter Vigil, was a creature of elegant law and precise engineering. It was not meant for places like this, a graveyard of stars, where physics grew frayed at the edges. Before them hung the maw's centerpiece, a void black anomaly that the first scouts had named the Obsidian Anchorage. It was a construct of impossible scale, a geometric sigil etched against the chaotic nebula, its sleeping arrays tracing patterns that made seasoned astrogators weep. The stakes were simple and severe. Rostova was here to keep anyone else from touching it. The Gilded Scrappers, a syndicate of high-tech looters, were already in system, their drives spitting out tachyonic filth. They saw a prize, a relic of some forgotten progenitor race ripe for salvage. Rostova saw a lock on the cage, and she had no intention of letting anyone pick it. Her mission was to observe, to contain, and to enforce the Coalition's quarantine. A simple mission for a place that was anything but. Her ship's AI Nomos spoke in the calm, synthesized tones of pure logic. Commander, the Scrapper fleet is altering its deployment. 3 heavy cruisers are moving to flank the anchorage. Their energy signatures suggest the imminent use of tectonic shears. The voice was a cool stream of data in the tense, recycled air of the bridge. Dr. Eris Thorne, the mission's resident historian and xenolinguist, pushed his spectacles up his nose. Shears won't work. They are trying to crack a safe with a sledgehammer. The artifact's surface passively negates kinetic and directed energy strikes. It's a principle of non-reciprocal physics we've only theorized. Rostova kept her gaze fixed on the main viewer, on the silent monolithic shape. They'll learn that soon enough. What they do next is what worries me. The universe does not care for intent. It only measures effect. A civilian freighter pilot hauling refined ores near the quarantine zone watched her nav console flicker. Old Jorik, captain of the Dust Devil, had run this route for 30 years. He knew the maw's moods, its sudden gravitic tides and plasma storms. But this was new. A low, resonant frequency was bleeding into his systems, making the ship's lights buzz and his teeth ache. It felt like the prelude to a song he hoped never to hear. He adjusted his course, adding another light second of distance between his rusty hull and the darkness where monsters slept. Nomos's voice cut through the bridge's low thrum again. The Scrapper cruisers are firing. Thin lances of coherent energy bright enough to scar retinas crossed the void. They struck the Obsidian Anchorage and vanished without a flash, without a ripple. It was like throwing stones into a tar pit. The Scrappers might as well have been shouting at a mountain. As you predicted, Aris Rostova murmured, her knuckles white on the command chair's armrest. Their frustration will make them predictable, Thorne replied, his eyes alight with academic fascination. They will escalate to methods that disregard collateral damage. That is their pattern. The law is a shield, not a club. Jax, her tactical officer, swiveled in his seat. Commander, their lead vessel, the Golden Mean, is hailing us. Standard syndicate frequencies. No encryption. It was a deliberate act of arrogance. On screen, Rostova ordered. The face that appeared was brutally scarred, one eye replaced with a dull, silver prosthetic. Warlord Kor, leader of this Scrapper fleet, gave a thin-lipped smile that did not reach his dead eye. Coalition cutter Kor's voice rasped, layered with static and contempt. This claim is ours by right of salvage. Your laws do not apply in the maw. Power is the only law here. Depart, or we will add your hull to our ledger. Rostova's expression remained placid, a mask of control she had perfected over years of service. Warlord Corps, you are in violation of Coalition Mandate 734. Your presence here is unlawful. Your actions risk systemic destabilization. Power down your weapons and withdraw or you will be fired upon. A debt is a promise etched in time. Corps' laughter was like grinding rocks. Your ship is a scalpel, Commander. We are a hammer. You cannot stop us from taking what is ours. The transmission cut out. He's not wrong about the ship classifications, Jax muttered, his fingers dancing across his console. Our mass driver is a pea shooter next to their spinal cannons. Then we will not engage with cannons, Rostova said, her gaze turning to Thorn. Eris, you've studied the transmissions from the first contact probes. You said the anchorage responds to something other than force. Thorn nodded, stepping forward. It responds to queries, to patterns. The early long-range scans detected faint neutrino emissions, almost like a thinking machine in a deep sleep state. I believe it's an archive, a library. The keys to it aren't physical. They are conceptual. Some truths are written in the language of mathematics. Conceptual keys, Jax scoffed. So we ask it nicely to stay put. Precisely, Thorn said without a trace of irony. We don't ask. We present a case. The scrappers are presenting a case for brute force and acquisition. We must present a case for custodianship and law. Rostova felt the terrifying weight of the decision. Her orders were to contain, but containment was failing. The scrappers were about to do something truly stupid, something that could awaken the anchorage in the worst possible way. She had to take a risk. She had to engage the anomaly itself. Nomos, she began, her voice steady, isolate the carrier frequencies Thorn identified. We are going to talk to the mountain. The mirror does not lie. It only reflects. The AI's avatar, a simple pulsating ring of light, shimmered on the holotank. Protocol confirmed. This course of action carries a 92% probability of mission failure and a 78% probability of vessel destruction. I am aware of the odds, Nomos Rostova said coolly, but you cannot calculate the cost of doing nothing. That is a human variable, the AI replied, a statement of fact, not judgment. I am prepared to execute your command. The vigil began to move not toward the scrapper fleet, but on a slow, deliberate vector toward the colossal, silent artifact. It was a gesture of peace, a supplicant's approach. On the tactical display, the scrapper cruisers paused their assault, their icons glowing with confusion. They had expected a fight or a retreat. They had not expected this. A teacher opens a door. They do not drag you through it. Thorn worked feverishly at his station, his console displaying cascading lines of code and ancient linguistic symbols. He wasn't writing a message. He was composing a proof. It began with the universal constants of physics establishing a shared language. Then it moved to simple logic gates, then to complex mathematical theorems. He was building a bridge of pure reason, one block at a time. It's a Socratic dialogue, Thorn explained, sweat beading on his forehead. We introduce a concept, law. We define its properties, equity, proportionality. We present a scenario. He uploaded sensor data of the scrapper fleet's aggressive posture. Then we ask a question. The question was not transmitted in words, but in a complex wave of modulated neutrinos. It was a query of exquisite simplicity. Justify this action. For a long moment, the void was silent. The only sounds on the bridge were the hum of the life support and the frantic tapping of Thorn's fingers. Rostova held her breath, every instinct screaming that she was insane. She was trying to reason with a god machine while pirates hammered at the gates. A ledger's first entry is always written in trust. Then the anchorage answered. Not with a wave, but with a shudder. A low, resonant hum pulsed through the Vigil's hull, the same vibration Rostova had felt earlier, but 1,000 times stronger. A single point of light, a soft silver-blue glow, ignited deep within the artifact's structure. It was a lone star in a manufactured night. "We have its attention," Thorn whispered, his voice trembling with awe. The scrapper warlord Kor saw the light as well. His dead eye narrowed. "What is this trickery?" he snarled to his crew. "They are trying to activate it. Full barrage. Use the singularity charges. Crack it open now." 3 of the scrapper cruisers launched heavy munitions projectiles that warped space-time as they flew. They were designed to destabilize small moons to peel away planetary crusts. They were weapons of obscene power, and they were aimed at the heart of the anomaly. The weight of a choice is measured by the worlds it moves. "Impact in 60 seconds, Jax called out, his voice tight. "There's no way that thing's surface can negate a singularity warhead." Rostova's eyes were locked on that single point of light. The anchorage had been asked to judge. Now it would render its verdict. "Hold your course, Jax." "Aris, what's it doing?" The light within the anchorage was expanding, not like an explosion, but like an opening eye. Geometric patterns of light raced across its black surface, illuminating dormant systems, powering up arrays that had slept for eons. The hum intensified, becoming a clear, resonant tone that vibrated across all spectra. It's running a calculation," Thorn stammered, staring at his readings. "A projection. It's modeling the outcome of the scrapper's attack. Not just on itself, but on the entire system. The count of a single life is infinite." On the main viewer, the 3 singularity warheads grew closer, their gravitic distortions bending the light of the distant nebula around them. They were 3 small points of absolute destruction closing in on the awakening relic. The scrapper fleet watched hungry for their prize. They believed they were about to witness the cracking of the ultimate cosmic vault. Then the anchorage acted. It did not erect a shield. It did not fire a weapon. It simply altered the equation. A wave of pure information washed over the incoming warheads. It was not an energy pulse. It was a correction, a recontextualization of physical law on a localized scale. The singularity charges, instruments of pure chaos, suddenly found themselves governed by a new, inescapable logic. Their containment fields, designed to hold back the infinite, were instructed by the anchorage's broadcast to obey a different rule balance. The forces within them were commanded to seek equilibrium, and they obeyed. A rightful ruler wears no crown. The warheads did not detonate. They simply unraveled. The compressed space-time within them expanded in a perfectly controlled symmetrical bloom. 3 spheres of incandescent energy appeared in the void, silent and beautiful. They were not explosions. They were releases, as if 3 clenched fists had been gently persuaded to open. The energy washed outward in a harmless, radiant wave that caused the scrapper cruiser's shields to shimmer like soap bubbles. A profound silence fell over the Vigil's bridge. Jack stared at his tactical display, his mouth hanging open. Thorn had sunk into his chair, looking like a man who had just witnessed a miracle. Warlord Kor's voice, now stripped of its arrogance and filled with a chilling mixture of fear and rage, screamed over the open channel. "What was that? What did you do?" Rostova found her voice, a calm island in the sea of impossibility. "We did nothing, Kor. We presented our case. The anchorage has presented its judgment. This is the nature of the teaching." A second light ignited within the anchorage twin to the first. Then a third and a fourth. A constellation was being born inside the machine. It was awake, and it was listening. A new query pulsed from the artifact, this time directed at the vigil. It was no longer a philosophical question. It was a practical one, a request for information rendered in the cold, clear language of mathematics. Query: identify the aggressor. Define the terms of engagement. State the lawful precedent for intervention. Rostova looked from the scrapper fleet, now hesitant and confused, to the glowing heart of the ancient machine. Her mission had been to contain a relic. Now she was being asked to become its arbiter, its partner in law. The responsibility was crushing. Nomos, she said, her voice ringing with newfound authority. Open a direct data link to the anchorage. Cite Coalition Charter Section 3 articles on self-defense and the protection of sovereign artifacts. Transmit our ship's logs, our mission orders, and the full recording of our exchange with Warlord Core. She paused. And Nomos. Transmit my command authorization codes. All of them. The ledger is open. The count begins. It was an act of profound trust, of surrendering her authority to a power she could not comprehend, in the hope that it would be a just one. The AI did not question her. Data streamed from the vigil, a river of light and logic flowing into the heart of the ancient machine. On the other side of the void, a scrapper captain on his bridge watched the data transfer with growing alarm. Warlord, the Coalition ship is communing with the artifact. It's feeding it tactical data. Our fleet dispositions our weapon yields. His voice was laced with superstitious dread. It's telling the ghost what we are. Core's face was a mask of fury. The prize was not just resisting, it was colluding with his enemy. His greed warred with a primal fear he had not felt in decades. He had come to rob a tomb and found it occupied by a living judge. All ships, he roared into his comms. Target the Coalition cutter. If we cannot have the prize, we will silence the witness, erase them from this system. The price of knowledge is responsibility. The scrapper fleet, nearly 24 ships of varying sizes, turned as one. Their weapon ports glowed with malevolent energy. They were no longer focused on the anchorage. Their target was now the vigil. Incoming fire solutions from the entire scrapper fleet, Jax announced, his voice grim. Evasive maneuvers will not be enough. Our shields will buckle in seconds. Rostova stood her ground. Her eyes remained fixed on the anchorage. She had made her choice, presented her case, and placed her faith in an ancient law. Hold your position, Jax. Do not fire. Let them commit. Commander Jax asked, his tone bordering on insubordination. She is correct, Nomos stated. The anchorage is processing. Any hostile action from our vessel would complicate the legal parameters of its response. A mirror shows you what you are not, what you wish to be. Beams of plasma and kinetic slugs converged on the vigil's position. It was a firing squad of overwhelming force. Rostova braced for impact, for the screech of tearing metal and the shriek of the emergency klaxons. But the impact never came. A wall of shimmering silver-blue light materialized in the space between the vigil and the scrapper fleet. It was not a solid barrier, but a complex holographic matrix of geometric patterns. The scrapper ordnance struck the matrix and simply stopped. Plasma bolts were held in suspension, sizzling and writhing. Kinetic slugs floated as if trapped in amber. The attack was frozen in time and space, a tableau of impotent aggression. The anchorage had not defended the vigil. It had recorded the hostile act. It had entered it into its ledger. The debt will be paid in the currency it was offered. A new transmission emanated from the anchorage, not a query, but a declaration. It was broadcast on all frequencies, a wave of pure, undeniable authority that overrode every communication system in the Tartarus Maw. It was not in any known language yet. Its meaning was perfectly, terrifyingly clear to every sentient mind that heard it. The act is recorded. The debt is assessed. The terms of repayment are hereby set. The holographic matrix holding the scrapper weapons dissolved. But instead of continuing toward the vigil, the ordnance was turned back upon its senders. Every plasma bolt, every kinetic slug was returned along its exact original vector. There was no malice in the act, no anger. There was only the perfect, cold, inescapable logic of a balanced equation. It was a mirror held up to the face of aggression. A gilded throne is still a cage. On the bridge of the golden mean warlord, Kor could only watch in stunned horror as his own barrage flew back at his fleet. Alarms blared across his ship. His helmsman screamed for orders that Kor could not give. There was no time to evade, no way to outrun their own attack. "Brace for—" His voice was cut off by the first impact. The scrapper fleet was hammered by its own fury. Shields designed to withstand enemy fire flared and died against their own weapons tuned to their own shield frequencies. Hulls buckled, systems overloaded. It was not a scene of destruction, but of self-inflicted chaos. Ships were disabled, not destroyed. Weapon systems were surgically neutralized. Drive cones sputtered and went dark. In the span of 30 seconds, the entire scrapper fleet was rendered inert, floating helplessly in the void. It was a masterful act of proportional response, a lesson, not an execution. This relic did not deal in death. It taught by numbers. It remembered by ledgers. It would never force a collar upon a thinking mind. The greatest power is the grace to withhold it. Rostova let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The vigil was untouched, pristine. Before her, a pirate fleet had been disarmed by the very force it had deployed. Status of the scrapper fleet. She asked, her voice a near whisper. All vessels are disabled but retain life support. Jax reported, his tone filled with disbelief. No hull breaches detected. They've been declawed, surgically. The anchorage then sent a private message, a simple stream of data for Rostova alone. It was a ledger entry. On one side, the scrapper fleet's transgression was listed in precise detail: unlawful entry, attempted piracy, unwarranted aggression. On the other side, the response: neutralization of offensive capability, containment of threat. The scales were perfectly balanced, and at the bottom a new line blinked awaiting her input. Disposition of contained assets. State your intent. The judge does not sentence. The law demands it. Rostova stared at the blinking cursor. The anchorage had appointed her the executor of its judgment. She could order the scrappers' destruction. She could have them imprisoned. She could strip their ships for salvage just as they had intended to do to the anchorage. The power was hers. The temptation was a dark, seductive whisper in the back of her mind. Kor deserved punishment. He lived by the sword. Let him perish by it. It would be just. But would it be lawful? She thought of the anchorage's actions. Proportional, measured. It had created no martyrs, only students in a very harsh classroom. She had to honor that precedent. "Aras," she said, turning to the historian. "What is the standard coalition protocol for captured pirates?" Thorn, looking shaken but resolute, cleared his throat. "Their vessels are impounded. Their assets are seized and redistributed to their victims where possible. The crews are offered a choice: stand trial in a coalition court, or be marooned on the nearest habitable non-sentient world with basic survival gear. It is the promise of order in a universe of chaos." Rostova nodded. That was the law. It was clean. It was just. Nomos, transmit our response. The disposition is as follows: impound all vessels under coalition authority. A prize crew will be dispatched. The crews are to be detained and offered the standard choice under the Articles of Piracy. The data streamed across. The blinking cursor on the ledger was replaced by her formal directive. The anchorage processed it for a fraction of a second. Then a new broadcast washed over the system. It projected complex tractor and repulsor fields gently but inexorably, pushing the disabled scrapper ships together into a neat, orderly cluster, a cosmic impound lot. A single final message was sent to Corps' crippled flagship, a simple statement of fact. Your debt is adjudicated. Your sentence is rendered by the authority you chose to engage. The ledger is now balanced. A quiet room can be louder than a battlefield. In the sudden, deafening silence, Rostova felt the true scale of what had happened settle upon her. She had come here to guard a mystery. She had become the steward of a power that could reshape galactic law. The obsidian anchorage was not a weapon. It was not a prize. It was a precedent. And it had chosen her as its voice. But as the immediate threat of the scrappers faded, a new colder dread began to creep in. Nomos brought it to her attention with its usual dispassionate clarity. Commander, I am detecting a tertiary energy signature on the edge of the system, the AI announced. It was masked until the anchorage's last broadcast. The signature is faint, but its profile is disturbing. Jax's console chirped an alert. I have it too. It's wrong. The drive signature is folded like it's trying to exist and not exist at the same time. Stealth tech, but not any kind I recognize. The void stares back with empty eyes. A lone civilian prospector hiding his unregistered skiff in the shadow of a rogue asteroid saw it first. He was running from debt collectors hoping to find a few rare isotopes to clear his name. He saw a ship slide out of the darkness, a vessel that seemed to drink the light around it. It was jagged and asymmetrical like a shard of obsidian given malevolent purpose. On its hull there was no name, only a spiraling symbol that seemed to hurt his eyes when he looked at it. A cold dread colder than the void itself washed over him. He killed his power, praying it hadn't seen him. Thorn moved to a secondary console, his face pale. That symbol. I've seen it in redacted archives. From the Schism Wars. It's the mark of the adherents of the void. The name sent a chill through the bridge. The gilded scrappers were simple criminals driven by greed. The adherents were a death cult. They believed that sentient life was a cosmic anomaly, a stain of order upon the beautiful, perfect chaos of entropy. They did not seek to conquer or to profit. They sought to erase. What would a death cult want with an ancient archive, Jax asked. A single truth can unravel a universe of lies. They wouldn't want to salvage it. Thorn said, his voice grim. They believe relics like the anchorage repositories of knowledge and law are anchors that prevent the universe from achieving its final glorious state of nothingness. They would want to destroy it. Utterly. Rostova looked at the tactical display. A single unidentified icon blinked at the system's edge. It was small, insignificant compared to the scrapper fleet the anchorage had just neutralized. But it felt infinitely more dangerous. The scrappers had been a hammer. This was a disease. Their ship is small, Jax noted. Even if it's advanced, it's one vessel. The anchorage can handle it. The adherents don't use hammers, Thorn countered. They use scalpels. They use poisons. They won't attack the anchorage with energy weapons. They'll try to infect it to feed it a paradox, a logical contagion that will force it to self-destruct. A choice once made becomes a destiny. The anchorage had proven itself against a physical assault, a straightforward application of force. but its entire being was based on logic, on law, on a system of balanced and rational thought. A philosophical poison was a threat it might not be equipped to handle. It was a perfect system, and a perfect system is often most vulnerable to an imperfect, irrational attack. A new query appeared on Rostova's command screen, a private message from the ancient intelligence she now served. A new variable has entered the equation. Its intent is registered as a null state paradox. It seeks to unwrite the ledger. Your counsel is required. The adherent ship began to move, accelerating toward them on a slow, patient vector. It was not coming for a fight. It was coming for a debate, and its argument was annihilation. Rostova was now the first line of defense, not just for a relic, but for the very concept of a lawful universe against an enemy that worshipped the void. Her ship was a cutter. The anchorage was a judge, and they were about to face a philosopher armed with a bomb made of pure nihilism. The weight of silence is heavier than any armor. Rostova met Thorn's terrified gaze. A logical contagion, Aris, give me something I can fight. Her voice was a low, controlled current in the charged atmosphere of the bridge. The adherent ship was a black knife poised to cut the thread of reason that held the anchorage together. You can't fight it with weapons, Thorn insisted, his fingers flying across his console, pulling up classified threat assessments that were mostly redactions and warnings. It's a mimetic weapon, a philosophical virus. They will transmit a paradox so perfectly constructed that any sufficiently advanced logical system will be forced into a recursive loop trying to solve it. It will tear itself apart from the inside out. Nomos's synthesized voice was unnervingly calm. I am analyzing the adherent vessel's energy signature. They are powering a specialized transmission array. The carrier wave is quantum entangled, making it impossible to jam. The payload will be delivered instantaneously and without interference. A law without a judge is only ink. Jack swiveled his chair, his face a grim mask. So we just sit here and watch them poison a god. Rostova declared, her mind racing. The anchorage had asked for her counsel. She would not offer it silence. We give it a defense it doesn't have. The adherents will argue that existence is meaningless, a flaw in the perfect void. We will argue that it is not. The adherent vessel's comms opened uninvited. No face appeared on the screen, only the same spiraling, eye-straining sigil from its hull. The voice that spoke was not a single voice, but a chorus, perfectly blended and devoid of all emotion. It was the sound of the grave. You who commune with the anchor, the chorus intoned. You are a flaw. Your order is a cage built from the fear of silence. We have come to offer the key. We will teach the great machine the ultimate truth. The equation of existence equals zero. A single candle defies all darkness. Before Rostova could respond, the attack came. It was not a beam or a missile, but a whisper across the void. A single elegant packet of data shot from the adherent ship and was absorbed by the anchorage. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the symphony of the ancient machine began to sour. The soft silver-blue lights within its structure flickered, some turning a sickly violet color. The resonant hum that filled the system devolved into a discordant screech, a sound of pure digital agony. On the main viewer, the perfect clean lines of the anchorage's sigil began to glitch, to twist into impossible non-Euclidean shapes that made the eyes water. The paradox has been delivered, Thorn said, his voice trembling. It's working. The anchorage's core logic is fragmenting. The ledger cannot be unwritten, only balanced. Rostova felt the machine's pain as a wave of psychic static. It was the feeling of a perfect mind being driven insane. She had to act. Nomos, you said you could not calculate the cost of doing nothing. That is our thesis. The value of existence is incalculable. I need you to prove it. Specify the data set. Commander, the AI responded its own voice, now carrying a faint, almost imperceptible waver as it fought the ambient corruption. Everything, Rostova commanded, standing from her chair, her voice ringing with an authority she did not feel. Transmit the entire Coalition public archive, every legal precedent, every birth certificate, every scientific discovery. But not just the dry data. Send the context. Send the love letters from the colonial archives. Send the music of 1,000 worlds. Send the blueprints for cathedrals and the medical logs of doctors saving lives. Send the final words of dying heroes and the first cries of newborn children. She strode toward the holotank, her eyes blazing. The adherents say the sum of existence is 0. We will show the anchorage our work. We will show it 1 billion entries, each with a value greater than 0. We will bury their paradox in an avalanche of meaning. A promise to a child is the most sacred of laws. On the colony world of New Harmony, a young father held up his infant daughter to the civic registration terminal. The screen scanned her tiny, wrinkled face. Name, the terminal's pleasant voice asked. He smiled, his heart swelling. Ilara. Her name is Ilara. The terminal chimed. Entry recorded. Welcome to the ledger, Ilara. A single tiny data point in an infinite sea, a new reason for the universe to exist. The Vigil's transmission arrays glowed, pouring a torrent of information into the wounded machine god. It was a flood of life in all its messy, chaotic, beautiful detail. It was the story of sentience, a story of striving, of failing, and of trying again. It was a counter-argument, written not in logic, but in love and defiance. Slowly, miraculously, the tide began to turn. The dissonant screech from the anchorage softened the discordant notes, finding their way back toward harmony. The glitching, impossible geometry on its surface stabilized, snapping back into its perfect, lawful form. The sickly violet lights flickered and returned to their healthy silver-blue glow. The machine was processing the new data, using the infinite value of individual lives to round out the adherents' nihilistic 0. The mirror's purpose is to show, not to judge. The chorus of the adherents spoke again, and for the first time there was a hint of something other than cold certainty in their tone. It was irritation. Your sentiment is a flaw, a transient chemical reaction. You offer it a fantasy to distract it from the truth. The truth is what we choose to build. Rostova shot back, her voice now a sharp spear of conviction. Your truth is a blank page. Mine has stories written on it. The adherent ship changed tactics. If it could not poison the mind of the anchorage, it would sever the connection to the source of the cure. It would eliminate the noisy, stubborn variable that was the Vigil. Commander, the adherent vessel is firing, Jax warned. It's not a standard weapon. The energy profile is non-existent. My sensors are screaming that there is a projectile, but they can't define its physical properties. A single black projectile, a sliver of solidified void, detached from the adherent ship. It did not streak across space. It simply moved, its presence defined only by the absence of the stars it occulted. One cannot argue with the tide. One must navigate it. It's a null causality torpedo. Thorne breathed, his face ashen. I've only read theoretical papers on it. It doesn't explode. It erases. It strikes a target and retroactively removes a piece of its history from the local timeline. A ship hit by one might suddenly find its engines were never installed, or its life support was never certified. Evasive maneuvers, Rostova ordered. The Vigil's engines flared, pushing the small cutter into a hard burn. But the torpedo did not follow a predictable path. It simply adjusted its position, its arrival a certainty. It will not miss. Nomos stated, its destination is not a set of coordinates, but a conceptual address. It is aimed at the idea of this ship. The torpedo struck. There was no explosion, no shudder of impact. There was only a quiet, sickening lurch in reality, like a single skipped frame in a film. A cascade of alarms erupted on the bridge. What was that damage report? Rostova demanded, gripping her console, as a shower of sparks erupted from a nearby conduit. A sharp pain lanced through her hand as she pulled it back, a red welt already forming across her knuckles. Jax's face was a mixture of confusion and panic. I don't know, Commander. The main comms array is offline, but it's not damaged. According to the ship's logs, we never had one. The schematics show an empty housing. It was never built. The cost of a lesson is paid in scars. They were cut off. They could not call for help. They could not transmit their findings. The adherents had not just damaged their ship, they had edited it. Rostova looked at the fresh burn on her hand. The cost of this engagement was becoming tangible, etched into her own skin and into the very history of her vessel. The adherent chorus spoke, their voice laced with triumph. The ledger is being corrected. Your flawed entry will be removed. The anchor will learn the beauty of the blank page. But they had made a critical mistake. They had shown their hand. They had revealed the nature of their ultimate weapon. And in doing so, they had given Rostova an idea. It was a terrible, beautiful, and exquisitely dangerous idea. It was a plan worthy of the machine she now served. A teacher learns from their student. She turned to the holotank where the light of Nomos flickered. Nomos, can the anchorage analyze the principles of that weapon? Can it understand the logic of erasure? The temporal distortion was localized, but observable, the AI replied. The anchorage recorded the event. The principles are paradoxical, but they are based in quantifiable physics. Yes, it can understand. Good, Rostova said, a fierce, determined light in her eyes. Because we are no longer on the defensive. The adherents wish to teach the universe about the power of zero. We are about to give them a practical demonstration. Her new orders were simple, yet they felt like the greatest gamble of her life. She instructed Nomos to transmit a formal request to the anchorage. She was not asking it to build a shield. She was not asking it to attack. She was asking it to learn and then to teach. The wisest rulers know when to listen. The adherent vessel, confident in its victory, launched a second null causality torpedo. This one was larger, its effect intended to be total. It was aimed at the Vigil's reactor core, an erasure that would not just disable them, but leave them as a cold, dead hulk that had for all intents and purposes never been truly alive. Second torpedo inbound, Jax announced, his voice resigned. No escape vector possible. Hold your position. Rostova commanded, her voice rock steady. She stood before the main viewer, her feet planted, a captain, going down with her ship. But she was not watching her doom approach. She was watching her ally prepare its lesson. This time, as the black sliver of nothingness closed in, the anchorage responded. A delicate, intricate web of silver-blue light formed in the torpedo's path. It was the same matrix it had used to catch the scrapper's weapons, but this one was different. It was more complex, folded in on itself in higher dimensions. It did not catch the torpedo. It welcomed it. The torpedo sank into the matrix like a stone into water, and the entire construct collapsed in on itself, vanishing into the heart of the anchorage. The ancient machine shuddered, its lights dimming for a heart-stopping moment, as it absorbed the logic of its enemy's weapon. It was processing the concept of unmaking. A debt of nothing is still a debt. The adherent chorus was silent. They had expected a scream of dying machinery. They had expected the vigil to wink out of existence. They did not understand what they were seeing. Then the anchorage acted. It did not fire a weapon. It did not return the torpedo. It sent a single tightly focused beam of pure information directly at the adherent ship. It was not a weapon designed to destroy matter. It was a command designed to edit a database. On the bridge of the adherent vessel, a high priest stared at their tactical console. The schematic for their null causality launcher was gone. The firing logs were blank. The energy conduits that were supposed to feed it now led to an empty, unassigned chamber. According to their own ship's systems, their ultimate weapon, the very tool of their nihilistic faith, had never been invented. It did not exist. It had never existed. The priest turned to the others, his voice for the first time a singular, terrified whisper. The memory. It's gone. The Unmaker. What was the Unmaker? They looked at each other, their faces blank with a confusion that cut to the very core of their being. Their greatest truth had been declared a fiction. Their ledger had been rendered blank. The perfect counter is a reflection. The adherent ship simply stopped drifting aimlessly. Its crew fanatics who had dedicated their lives to a weapon they could no longer remember were utterly broken. They were not defeated in battle, but in principle. The anchorage had not destroyed them. It had simply held up a mirror and showed them the void they so admired. A new civilian message trickled into the system, its pathfinding protocols routing around the Vigil's non-existent comms array to an emergency backup receiver. It was from an old archivist on a deep space library station, a message logged for the public record. Oddest thing, the message read. Found a corrupted data slate on the Schism Wars. Contains a full transcript of the adherents' foundational text, the Codex of Unbeing. But the central chapter, the one that supposedly describes their methods, is just empty. A printing error, I suppose. Seems their entire philosophy is based on a missing page. A wound is a reminder that the past is real. Rostova watched the disabled adherent ship, a silent monument to a failed idea. She looked down at her bandaged hand. The burn was a dull, throbbing ache. It was a reminder of the reality of the fight, a small, personal entry in a ledger of pain and survival. The loss of their main communications was a permanent scar on her ship, a constant reminder of the cost of this victory. They had won, but they were not unmarked. The silence that followed was profound. The scrappers were neutralized. The adherents were lost in a fog of their own manufactured ignorance. The Tartarus Maw was for the first time in centuries quiet. The anchorage pulsed with a soft, steady light, its song once again a pure and harmonious hum. It sent a final public broadcast across the system, a statement of precedent for any who might be listening. Conflict is an attempt to unbalance an equation. Law is the act of restoration. The ledger is now closed. Then a private message appeared on Rostova's personal console. It was a simple data stream, but it contained a universe of meaning. It was a copy of the Vigil's original unedited schematic, showing the main comms array in perfect detail, and beside it, a single query. Request to restore. State your will. The greatest strength is the will to rebuild. The anchorage was offering to repair her ship to undo the damage done by the adherents. It was offering to erase the scar. Rostova thought for a long moment. She looked at her bandaged hand, then at Jack's, who was already working on a jury-rigged solution for their communications. To accept would be to erase the cost to pretend the victory was clean. Negative, she transmitted back, her voice firm. We will carry the lesson. The scar will serve as a reminder of the cost and of the law. A flicker of understanding pulsed from the great machine. It did not offer again. It respected her choice. It understood that some debts are best left on the books, a permanent record of what was learned. Weeks later, the Tartarus Maw was a different place. Coalition heavy cruisers had arrived, towing away the scrapper fleet for trial, and the silent adherent vessel for quarantine and study. The Maw was no longer a forbidden zone, but a place of pilgrimage for legal scholars and diplomats. They came to witness the obsidian anchorage now formally known as the Anchorage of Precedent. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the bridge of the vigil, her hand now bearing a pale, silvery scar. She had new orders. She was no longer a patrol captain. She was the first official coalition ambassador to a sovereign, non-biological entity. Her ship, with its jury-rigged comms and its unique history, was to be the permanent embassy. Nomos's avatar glowed softly. Commander High Command has formally ratified your report. The Rostova Doctrine is now enshrined in coalition law. Ancient artifacts of this nature are to be approached as peers, not as prizes. You have changed the foundations of interstellar law. Rostova barely heard it. Her attention was on the anchorage. It was no longer just a sleeping giant. It was a partner. It was a teacher. Its surface was now a vast public ledger, its silver-blue lights tracing the disposition of the cases it had judged. One entry showed the impounding of the scrapper fleet. Another showed the quarantine of the adherent ship. And now a new entry was blinking into life, a declaration of its own nature. Statement of being. I am a repository. I learn by observing. I teach by reflecting. I judge by balancing. The law is the framework of existence. Every action is an entry. Every consequence is a count. She now understood her purpose, her place in this new reality. She was not a warrior guarding a fortress. She was a librarian tending to the first page of the most important book in the galaxy. The universe had been a place of chaos, of might makes right. But now it had a standard. It had a precedent. It had a judge who could not be bribed, a law that could not be bent. The universe does not require saviors. It requires accountants.